So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Indiana Farmers Market Forum. I'm Deb Troca, the Executive Director of the Indiana Cooperative Development Center, and we're proud to host this year's forum. We have a fantastic lineup of topics and speakers over the next 2 days, and we're thrilled that you're here with us. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. So please keep your microphones muted during the session. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat, and our speakers will do their best to respond to all of those questions and comments. We are recording each session, so you'll be able to revisit materials or catch up on any sessions that you miss. So with that, we'll get started. So our first speaker today is Sharon Pattee from the Indiana Department of Health, who will provide us with an update on food safety and home-based vendors. Sharon began her career in public health, the Wabash County Health Department, in 2004. Over the years, she served as the retail food safety inspector in Grant, Boone, and Delaware counties before joining the Indiana Department of Health. In 2014, she became a state wholesale trainer at the Department of Health, but returned to her retail roots in 2016 as a retail food specialist in the Food Protection Division. This January, she was named Indiana's first state trainer and standardization officer for the Food Protection Division. And Sharon has been a longtime participant and speaker at the forum, and we are delighted to have her with us today. So Sharon, the floor is yours.
Hey, Deb. I want to thank both Deb and Christine for inviting me today. I always love working with our Farmers Market Forum. It gives us an opportunity to prove that regulators are humans and that we don't bite and that we love to work together. Because when it comes down to it, like we are one big family trying to help the farmers markets grow in Indiana as big as they can be. So, with that being said, the Indiana Department of Health's mission is to promote, protect, and improve the health and safety of all Hoosiers. And our vision is that every Hoosier reaches optimal health regardless of where you live, learn, work, play, or raise your pets. So today we're just going to go over some basic food science. Christine had said, so what's the angle this year? And I'm like, well, since Indiana Code has now recognized TCS over the old term, potentially hazardous food, let's look into that. Let's take a little dive. So for those of you that are new to Farmers Market Forum or hearing me speak, just to let you know, like my goal is always to have our local health departments and farmers markets and market managers work together as closely as possible. It's one of my favorite things about my job is to bring people together in this format. So there's no questions too little, too small, too silly. Once again, if you're new, we have 5 years worth of recordings, I believe, Christine, if we go back. And so I'm just touching a little bit. I will cover a little bit of food safety, a little bit of like how this all works and like how to reach out to your people. So with that started, welcome to the regulatory part. You're just like, oh no, the boring part. We'll make this simple. I promise. So being a regulator, am I the hen and the fox in the hen house? Like, I don't think so. I think we're friends. I don't bite. Regulators don't bite. I'm always encouraging people. Like, they're like, oh, but if I reach out to the health department, they'll know what I'm up to. It's like, oh no. Like, honestly, since House Bill 1149 came about, home-based vendors are required to turn in their ServSafe or their certified food handler certificate to the local health department. And that's a great time when you have the opportunity to have these discussions that we're going to discuss today. We're here to build relationships, not to knock anybody down. And the best thing we can do is to support small business at farmers markets because it's our community too. In Indiana, we have 92 counties. We have 95 health departments, I believe. Since Fisher has their own currently. Lake County has 3 counties. So they have the county, they have City of Gary, and then they have East Chicago. So we have some communities that have their own health departments too, separate from the actual county. So just know that it's never, we want you to feel free to reach out to that health department. If you ever struggle with that, feel free to reach out to me. I know most of our inspectors, even though we have had a lot of turnover. We're here to support our local communities. I live in Wabash County, but I love going to other farmers markets. Anywhere that has a dog friendly market, you can count on me. With that being said, once again, if we don't work together, if we pull apart, if you see the regulator as the fox in the henhouse, that just makes things more of a hardship. Or if I have an inspector out there, because we do have some rogue people, if we have inspectors out there that maybe need to be more educated or more user friendly, I I try to be that person that can be there for you and help bring you all together. I know in the past that different vendors from the farmers market, both home-based vendors, regular retail people, people selling eggs, I get lots of calls. I name my dog Honey Bear because I tell people all the time, like, you can't have naked honey bears. Like, all food has to be labeled. And so I take the bandana on and off my dog to be like, you can't be naked. Like, you have to be labeled. But some people at times we have inspectors too that need to have that training on, like, no, like, you have to be kind and not hold regulators hostage by not sharing this information. So the first thing to do when you're thinking about being a home-based vendor or to join the farmers market, you may have a cupcake shop, you may be wholesaling your popcorn, whatever. We have a lot of home-based vendors that grow over the years and do become retail or wholesale. So with that, reach out to your local health department and decide, do I need permits? Do I need to have a brick and mortar? Can I be a home-based vendor? If I'm a home-based vendor, what does that look like? What sort of information do I need to do that? So explaining your dream so that we can help you grow makes a big difference. Sometimes we may not be able to agree. Like, you're like, oh no, like, you need to have a retail permit to do that. Or maybe you're a non-for-profit and we're just gonna like let you do your own thing because non-for-profits get to do their own thing. However, we all come together at the farmers market. Always feel free to ask those questions, get feedback from them, and make a point to understand, like, are there guidance documents I need to follow? So sometimes that lack of communication ends up being a hardship, and you don't want that on a 100-degree day at the farmers market when it's beautiful and you could be having fun. Like, having all this smoothed out before the farmers market is so positive for everybody. So when you talk to that regulator and they're like, or they're not sure, or they're uncertain themselves, sometimes your vision may need some more research to bring that to market, no matter which way you decide to do it. The food items that you may want to do may not be regulated by your local health department. It may be a product that's regulated by the FDA. It may be a product that, like, you're dreaming big and you're like, I'm going to can these green beans. Well, that's not something that Indiana even regulates. Like, that's FDA regulation. So with that being said, we can help you make those communications and get your product to market and get it to the farmers market legally. It may have not been the way you visioned, like a home-based vendor couldn't do that, but they can help you make those communications, get the paperwork started, and explain what that process looks like. Your product may needs to have some product testing. The sugar cream pie, for example, my mom is always saying, like, that my sugar cream pie never goes bad. And I'm always like, Mama, that's because your sugar cream pie never lasts that long. Like, honestly, it doesn't sit on the counter for a day because we done ate it. So looking at that, like, does your product need testing? You may be trying to sell items as a home-based vendor, but the product is a TCS food. In the past, that would have been called a potentially hazardous food, but IC Indiana Code did catch up on that terminology. And hopefully, we do have an Indiana food code coming out this year. And the new term that Indiana is using is TCS. And that means that it may need to be held under refrigeration for safety. There may be a more viable mode of selling your product. For example, you want to sell honey, but you want to sell it out of state. And do you want to sell it to restaurants? Well, that might be a wholesale inspection and regulation. And that's not a bad thing. Like, you may be expanding that business way beyond our borders. You may be wanting to sell to China. Like, we don't want to stop your dream. So, with that being said, if you decide to go wholesale, in Indiana, wholesale, if you register under the Indiana Department of Health Wholesale Division, there is no cost or fee for that. So we can get the paperwork to you and get you started on your dream in that way. And then you may need to just know the requirements associated with the food product. Do we need to hook you up with another regulatory source that may be the one that regulates that product? We can give you guidance on all that, the local health department. If they are a newer inspector or just are uncertain, like once again, reach out to me or the Indiana Department of Health, and we'll get you going on the right direction. We want to, and if we can do that before the farmers market starts this year, that's even more fun. So, with that being said, I put a little game in here today. And so, if you can count the fox, so I said, like, I'm not the fox in the hen house. So, there was a fox on the first screen. Here's your second fox. So, if you can count the foxes throughout the presentation, we'll see how many we have at the end. So, on fox number 2 slide, when considering what products can be made by that home based vendor, the biggest concern for food safety is that product potentially hazardous food? PHF is now defined as time temperature control for food. TCS, over time, it rolls out a little faster or a little better. It's hard to catch up. Indiana's been 20 years behind the nation in our code. And so we're trying to get all our terminology caught up with those codes. So, what is a TCS food? Well, I'm just going to start out with the basics. If the food product you want to make, it has to be refrigerated for food safety, like your tuna noodle casserole. Like, yes, it may be a TCS food. If it has to be kept refrigerated, so you've cut open that watermelon, and once you cut it open, it needs to go in the refrigerator. That may be for food safety. If it's for quality's sake, like you're like, oh no, like this product just tastes better if it's put in the refrigerator, it may not be a TCS food. It may just be for quality's sake. The definition of a TCS food, you can find this under any of the FDA language or what we're updating in Indiana. This will be coming out with new documentation we'll be releasing this year. So if you've taken your Serve Safe class or a Safe Food Handlers class and turned in that, this will make more sense because you're like, wait, I'm hearing two definitions. So catching up with that, it's a food that's a naturally natural synthetic. I'm having trouble this morning, and requires temperature control because it's in a form capable of supporting any of the following: the rapid and progressive growth of infectious or toxigenic microorganisms, the growth and toxin production of C. botulinum. I'm going to drink for a moment. Sorry, guys. In raw shell eggs, the growth of Salmonella enteritis. And the term can also include the following: a food of animal origin that is raw or heat treated, a food of plant origin that is heat treated, such as oatmeal, or consists of raw seed sprouts, cut melon, garlic, and oil mixtures that are not modified in any way that results in the mixtures being able to be shelf stable. Things that are not are non-TCS foods. So if you boil an egg and the shell is intact, it can sit on the counter. Right? It is shelf stable. The food with a water activity of 0.8 or less, think saltine crackers. Food with a pH level of 4.6 or below when measured at 75 degrees ambient temperature, not at the farmer's market on a 100-degree day. And the food in an opened, hermetically sealed container that's commercially processed. So we're thinking Denny Moore stew here to achieve and maintain commercial sterility under conditions of non-refrigerated food storage and distribution. So the FDA 2022 Model Food Code also adds charts to this. If you're interested in seeing the interaction of the food water activity and the pH, the FDA charts have that. And within, hopefully by May of this year, we'll have that up on our website too, once the new food code has been adopted in the state of Indiana. So with that, you can look at the two charts and you can see, like, okay, if my water activity is this and my pH is this, then it like either it's going to be fine or I need additional product testing. And it will explain that in those charts. So if this sounds complicated, having that relationship with your local health department or Purdue Extension helps so much. We're both free resources. Your local health department's free. Nobody's charging you. You could go in. Some health departments are busier than others. Some are one-man shows. Some may have a consulting division where they have somebody in the office that can help you pretty much anytime. I'm on the road a lot. It's hard to catch me. If you send me an email, if I can't answer, I'll find a friend that can. It's all about establishing these relationships and friendships. So a lot of people just want a list, and I get it. Like, where's that list? Other states have lists. Anyway, so Indiana did decide to like develop a list. I generally have one going that when I talk to local health departments, I'm like, oh no, like the elderberries are going to be an issue. But when we went to document that over the years, because things have changed, science and technology, once again, Indiana trying to catch up, we've like sometimes that list, you may hear one thing from one county and another thing from another county. There's also 4 guidance documents out there starting in 2008 to uh, maybe 2009, 2010, 2018, and the last one was in 2022 when House Bill 1149 was adopted. So there's 4 guidance documents that I use on a regular basis. I'm like, well, if we go back to 2010, there's a list. Anyway, but then over time, such as the 2018 guidance document, talks about fermented foods and how you have to carry that pH meter. So if that health department or even I seem wishy-washy at times, just know that we're trying to come up with a better way to relay information and be more consistent because we know consistency is the issue. So even when we looked at Ohio, Illinois, like what are they doing for the cottage industry? We were trying to figure out how to best help. So here's some of the decisions that go into this. When we're not going to share your ingredients. I promise. Like nobody's sharing your mama's recipe or your secret agent ingredients. But to help us make these decisions on where this falls, we may need information like ingredients, like did you forage the mushrooms or did they come from a store shelf? The processing. So when you're explaining to that inspector, like there's a kill step, you're going to put the zucchini bread in the oven or the cheese bread in the oven. And then there's a kill step. If there's a pathogens, the inspector needs to know that. The cook or bake time, with the water activity involved in the batter, will that be enough time to make it a non-TCS food? So, and then packaging. So I'm glad to say that with new information we're going to be giving out in the next couple months, packaging in Indiana is going to be less of an issue. But we know over the last 12 years, this has been a big thing. Like, oh, you could do it in a Dixie cup if you put wax paper over it, or if you use a rubber band with cheesecloth. So just know I can't share a lot of details today, but there are upcoming updates that are going to make your life and our lives way more happy when it comes to packaging. So, with that being said, ta-da! In cooperation with Purdue University's Department of Food Science and Indiana Department of Health, we have developed a home-based vendor handbook that will be released this spring. And if you're like, Sharon, when? Because I haven't even told Christine this. No, it is coming out. It's still being edited, and of course, it has got to go through review of the lawyers and be pretty to make it through all the branding issues, but that bit will be released shortly. And I believe Purdue University is covering that next week. So if you need more information, do reach out to your local extension agent because Purdue is releasing that information. So there's no changes to the code. When people are like, wait a minute, like I didn't hear about a new bill being passed. There is no new bill being passed. If you want to go back to what the last bill was, it was House Bill 1149, I believe in 2022, or at least the guidance came out in 2022. There's no new changes to food code for home-based vendors or vendors in general for 2025. However, we are trying to make those interpretations of the law so much better for all of us. It'd be more easy to get on one page and be more consistent with the information And with my new manager, she was like, oh, she's from Georgia. She's like, if I'm coming to Indiana, we got to make it pretty and like glossy, like all these other states do. So just know, I believe it's a 40-page document. However, it's got lists of foods that are safe, the public health reasons why. Like if you want to use a buttercream frosting recipe, approved ones through different scientific agencies. So we're going to have some really good information for you guys based on science instead of guidance documents and like, well, maybe if you haven't product tested, you know, the wishy-washiness of it. Things are always safe. So if you're like, oh my goodness, Sharon, okay, so I'm waiting for this guidance document, just know if any of these are your items that you want to do, these are safe. They've always been safe for the last 12 to 14 years. You've been able to do this. So if you're new, here you go. Baked items such as cakes, fruit pies, cookies, brownies, cupcakes, crackers, muffins, fruit turnovers. It's going to get baked as it has a final kill step in case there's, something that, something that's spoiled or ingredients. It's going to get killed in the baking process in the oven. Like nothing, once it comes out on the other side, unless it's undercooked, it's going to be safe. Candies such as fudge, taffy, fruit leathers, caramels, hard candy, egg noodles, tree nuts, legumes. Also, when I mention those, Indiana does not require for home-based vendors to have allergen warnings, so you don't have to be worried about that. And I don't see that happening in the near future, all for the state of Indiana. Jams, jellies, preserves, and once again, that is a high acid fruit and pure sugar. No sugar alternatives because we need that free water to be all wrapped up to make that shelf stable. Wild mushrooms. We highly recommend that if you're selling foraged mushrooms, that you have those identified by a agent, have the certifications with them, but we cannot require that. And then the other thing I get a lot of questions about is mushrooms. May I grow the mushrooms in my sewing room or my basement or wherever you want to grow the mushroom packets? And that's a yes. And it's not a home-based vendor product because it's just produce. You're growing produce. It's either going to grow or not grow. Popcorn balls, trail mixes. You can even put those in mason jars. When you're like, the crazy inspector told me I couldn't seal this. Those are things that if you want to use a mason jar for, nothing's going to grow. It's a dry mixture. And once again, that's going to come out with this new guidance we bring out too. Excuse me, guys. I've got some throat issues, so one moment. Sorry. Roasted ground coffee beans, herbs, and teas. These are all things that are not TCS foods. They're safe. I highly recommend you start out if you want to start as a home-based vendor and then grow into a coffee shop, have a brick and mortar. That's a great way to do that research, that market research to be like, oh, this tea blend was really popular or not. That's what we want you to do to grow and have these opportunities. Non-negotiable. So you're like, oh, but I want to do this. And my food inspectors always said that that's a no-no. And it's probably still a no-no. Here is a like, ain't going nowhere. This is still going to be a no-no pretty much across the nation for anybody that has cottage industries. So once again, in Indiana, we don't use the term cottage industry. If you are seeing any document that says cottage industry, it's going to be from another state. Indiana recognizes the IC, the Indiana code recognizes the term home-based vendors. And that's sort of how we differentiated ourselves. Once again, if you're a home-based vendor, these items can only be sold within the state of Indiana, even with the new shipping, being able to ship. It just can't be shipped across state lines. So here are the products that are either TCS foods or regulated by another entity where we're like, it can't be done as a home-based vendor. And that would be canned or hermetically sealed containers of acidified or low acid foods. If you're doing a tomato juice, if you are doing vegetables, anything that's going to have to be pressure canned, most likely hot water bath, those are going to be no-nos. Heat treated vegetables, fermented vegetables in sealed containers. Alcohol, anything above 0.5%, you're going to hear your inspector be like, no vanilla, because typically that's If you soak one vanilla bean in some alcohol, you're just going to have vanilla flavored alcohol. So when it comes down to it, we don't regulate alcoholic beverages at the Indiana Department of Health. That's excise. And vanilla tends to fall into some of those categories that we're not able to do testing for. Foods that require a water activity and pH testing that have no documentation. If we go into the farmer's market and you have no documentation or no testing, and it's one of those iffy products, most likely you'll be asked to remove that product until you can get that done. Cut melons, raw sea sprouts, these would be TCS foods. They're a no. Salad dressings and sauces. Typically, these are foods that have to be modified with vinegar, and then they get sealed in a bottle, and nobody knows what's in your bottle. So typically, those are no. We can go more in depth than that if somebody has more questions. Quail eggs, pickled eggs. There's been some horrible deaths with pickled eggs. Jerky sausages, dried meats. Those are all things that take special processing, and we work with the Board of Animal Health on that. Non-modified garlic and oil mixtures. If you're adding that root vegetable, such as garlic, into oil, it can grow botulism spores, and then we have the botulism is a concern. Wine, like I tell the girls, like, we're not the alcohol police. Like, nobody wants to come out and find your bootleg liquor. Like, that's not us. That's not the foodies. So cut leafy greens, no salad mixtures because that's now a TCS food. Dairy, such as cream, ice cream, yogurt, pepper butters, jellies, and products. Those peppers come in depending on when they're harvested, the actual plant, the type. Most peppers fall in a really scary area for pH. And so typically without testing, that cannot be done. Very questionable. Talk to your local health department about that. And then meals, frozen meals, dinners, all that. Typically, once again, you're going to have to freeze that casserole or it has meat in it, and that would be a no for TCS foods. Mystery products. So you come up with the best product ever, and you're like, I want to take this to market. So every year we get phone calls, and I end up sometimes I spend hours on the phone with vendors. We've had to like knock down some time. So once again, we're really happy about this new guidance going out because especially if it's one of those things that people want to debate, like we end up butting, and we try to avoid that as much as possible because maybe you can't do it once again as a home-based vendor, but we'll try and find you an outlet. Like there's no food that cannot be produced. It's just how you're going to be able to do that. How is it processed? Does the product have a known water activity and pH? I have to tell you, pawpaws in the state of Indiana, you can find the soil activity, the pH for the soil, but finding that information was really difficult. We left that to Purdue University. And once again, all that information will be in the new booklet. How it will be packaged, who will be the end consumer, and where will it be sold. So when House Bill 1149 came about, that was the first time that things could be shipped. So like, do I need to have tamper-resistant packaging? Do I need to keep logs? Those are both yeses. So just once again, if you need that information, it'll be in the new guidance on how to do that food. How do you if you are a home-based vendor coming to the farmer's market for the first time, or maybe you've been out there before and you're like, the market's going to start at 8 in the morning. I've been up all night. I don't have time to do these labels. Please make sure you get your labels on there. Nothing makes your product more questionable than not being labeled. And I can tell you, be proud of what you're achieving. You are a small business. You're growing your small business. Without your information on there, nobody knows who to come back to. So, and then also by law, it has to have your home address. So when people are like, oh, can I put my PO box? The reason that is on there is in case the one time that inspectors do get involved with home-based vendor products is if there's an outbreak or a complaint, we have to get a hold of you. A PO, like a food inspector, like for the love of God, we're not going to your post office and just sitting at your post office waiting for somebody to come to that post office box and put a key in there. That's not what we do. So we need your address so that we can contact you and be like, okay, like we got a report that there was dog hair in that would be me. Anyway, there's dog hair in the donuts. So we'd have to investigate that. So be proud of what you do. you're following those sanitary standards, you're excited about your recipe, you want to grow your business, like put your warning label on there. The home-based this product is home produced and processed. The production area has not been inspected by the State Department of Health, and it's not for resale. By law, that statement has to be on your product in 10-point font. It has to be legible, it has to be able to see. Now, guys, here's the thing. If you're not computer savvy or you want to give your kids an opportunity to be part of your business, have them, they can put it in crayon, they can put it on pencil. This doesn't have to be a fancy label. It just has to work and it has to be present. Some health departments will accept a placard. However, once again, that's a discussion to have with your local um, regulator, because I know I had markets where they would just disappear. I couldn't trust that they stayed present. And by law, like as a regulator, I had to do due diligence and make sure that that information was present. So I leave that up to our locals. I tell them that's up to them to make that decision. If you go from county to county and you're like, but that inspector allowed it, just know that it's up to that county to determine if they allow placarding. If I am just speaking like blah, 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 like what is Sharon talking about? Just a reminder, here are the most current IC codes. So when House Bill 1149 came about, actually after it, like do that whole, what was it? Schoolhouse Rock thing where they're like, oh, here's how you like a law becomes a bill. So with the home-based vendors, 1149 became IC 1642 5.3. It was passed in 2022, and it replaced 1642 529 that had been in place since 2009. And once again, if you're hearing what is Sharon talking about? If you, for example, need to know like where can I find that labeling thing? Did she just pull it out of her rear? Does she know what she's talking about? Here are the Indiana codes that go with each of that. And Christina will like have this information for you if you need to come back and reference this information. So if you're like, why is that crazy inspector at the farmer's market? Like, I'm the market manager. I did not invite the food inspector. Just know that your taxpayer dollars require us to come. Maybe you're on the other side and like your local food inspector is a one-man show, is like, I cannot get to the market every weekend. Like, this is unreasonable. Each county and their health board sort of come to like an agreement on how often they may or may not inspect local farmers in the market. But the reason you may see us there is because it's our job. So as much as we want to be out there shopping instead of inspecting, your local regulator will be there and may stop by your booth. So once again, many different vendors come to the farmers market. And for those of you market managers that have been doing this for a while, you're like, Sharon, this is old news. But we get this question a lot. Like, why did the inspector think she had to show up? He, she, we, why are they at the farmers market? So here's some ideas. They are required to review your products to make sure your labeling's correct. So they're not inspecting you, but they are required to review it just to make sure that you're up to snuff. You cannot call yourself a home-based vendor unless you're following the guidance. So we have to make sure. And, you know, there may be some times that you're like, oh no, like this is a product that we've said no to. You didn't realize it, or you had the product testing done, but forgot the paperwork. Make sure that you bring paperwork. If you have something that a product analysis had to be on, having all that information in place to show the food inspector helps when they do that review. Versus, I am your local bakery that showed up. I had to get a food permit to be there, a temporary food permit. I paid for that permit and I'm paying for that inspection. So if you're a paid vendor that's getting a food permit to be there, or you're a mobile food truck, because sometimes they come to farmers market, or I'm the temporary elephant ear wagon, depending on the market and what your market looks like. Those things are allowed. They just have to have permits. If they are paying for that permit, they have the right to, you have the right to expect that inspection because you paid for that inspection. So that may be why they're there. Ideas, once again, have your documentation in place. You have an egg board permit, have that with you. Have the buffering solutions if you are doing one of those fermented foods. It's required that you're able to calibrate your pH meter and do that at the inspector's request if you're doing fermented foods. Have all your labeling present and consistent. Once again, I hear a lot of times people say things like, I just didn't have time to get the label on there. I'm like, then you have to remove it until you get the label on there. Or when we do that review, people with raw milk, it's only raw milk for animal consumption. By law, the state chemist office says that has to be on the product. So if the outside of the bottle is wet and somebody's like, well, I can't keep the label on because the product's wet. Well, we need to get you a twisty tie or something and get that product attached to the product. It has to be on there. The local health department may be able to help you with ideas on that too. Home-based vendor may only sell non-TCS foods. I've said it 20 times. Those are a lot of times that we go through and we make sure that trail mix is just trail mix and nothing else. As if you are going to sample with all the guidance that's out there and the new guidance, it's up to the local health department, not the market master or manager necessarily to decide if that can be done. Under law, under that guidance, it's always been up to the local health department to be like, is it safe in this park? Do they have access to water for hand washing? So if you're sampling, most likely hand washing is going to be required. Hand sanitizer never replaces hand washing. If your inspector allows you to sample, just know that most likely they're going to require you, and that's a require, hand washing because it's a privilege to sample, not something that's mandatory. But this is how simple it can be done. I get people, it used to be a $5 challenge. It's probably a $10 challenge now. This is how you can do it. Go out to your garage and you can find things like camping gear. That could be your mop bucket with the discard bucket. The waste paper basket could be the Walmart sack that you're putting your paper towel. I'm just going to suggest you like make sure that that paper toweling's somewhere it's not like blowing all over the ground because then it's just dirty. Soap, it doesn't have to be fancy soap. It can just be the stuff from the Walmart. And when it comes to that warm water, Indiana's changing our law that hot water hand washing had to be 100 degrees. It's going down to 80. So just know warm water, I'm happy with any water, clean water. So just know that that is the requirement. And we love a free flowing spigot so that you can put both hands under that. I know in the past I've seen coffee pots. Please do not plug your coffee pot in for hand washing. Nobody's going to use it if the water's boiling and you boil your hands. So it's just a terrible experience for all of us. I'd rather have cold water than hot water that's going to boil people. Once again, going into those types of vendors at the farmers market, I get this question a lot, guys. Market managers may choose which kind of vendor be present market. And that's with a T that I've lost there. It's not up to the local health department to determine who rents space at a farmer's market. Most of this presentation has been aimed at the vendors. However, with the collaboration and consulting between the market manager and the local health department, it benefits all. So if you're the market manager, go into the local health department and be like, hey, I have questions about a vendor that's doing this, or what does this vendor need to do, or do I need to gather up this information? Your local health department can help you with that and take some of that responsibility off you if you want that. So for example, egg board permits, the vendor is going to, if they have domestic chicken eggs, they're going to be required to have that egg board permit. But if it's duck eggs, that permit comes from the local health department. Duck eggs or quail eggs are going to be a TCS food that need to be refrigerated. And those items have to have a food permit from the local food inspector to be able to be sold. The same with the freezer meat. So food establishments selling prepackaged non-potential hazardous food from an approved food source. So you got a kid that wants to sell a wagon full of Diet Cokes. He's pulling his wagon around. We are not looking at that. So just like a convenience store on wheels, you got the little Debbie's in the wagon, got little Debbie's set out on a tent. I'm not inspecting them. Girl Scout cookies, I'm so not inspecting those. I'm going to eat them. So just know there are some things that just do not need permits. Home-based vendors are going to get a review. The retail food establishments Once again, they paid for that permit. That inspector better be out there at least once a year to inspect them. Non-for-profit organizations, I'm going to wave at you and say hi because, like, we don't regulate non-for-profits that operate less than 15 days a year. Wholesale products, if you are getting a wholesale inspection and you come to the farmer's market, you're probably prepackaged and you're not going to need a permit. But if you want a sample, you may need to contact the local health department. Crafts, entertainments, flowers, plants. I'm not going to look at those, but I'm going to enjoy them very much. And then one of my final information pieces is who's the who of regulatory partners. You got to be kidding me, Sharon. I got to get a hold of 20 different regulators to get this product done. Once again, a local health inspector can help you figure out who really needs, like, who do you need to contact? So with those freezer meats, you took your pretty pig to the market and you had that done, and it says not for resale because it was your pretty pig going back to you. However, you paid for an extra inspection and now you can sell that meat. With that being said, it has to have a USDA or Board of Animal Health inspection, and it has to have a stamp on it. Then you will get a local permit from your local health department to make sure that that's frozen. Frozen's frozen at the farmer's market. Jerky, USDA and BOA stamp of inspection or variance by a retail food from IDOH. So no matter what, food needs to be stamped or have a variance. For jerky, I know we've had some different vendors playing some games with jerky. Jerky is my passion. Anyway, so once again, regulate us, contact us, regulators. We can help you through that if that's a dream you have. Domestic chicken eggs, that is going to be sold by the Indiana Egg Board at Purdue. And so you contact them. They have different levels of permits. Your local food inspector will never candle your eggs. However, those domestic chicken eggs do get candled. Pet food always goes through the state chemist's office. They require things like nutrition and like all sorts of things that we don't require. This is my favorite thing to buy at a farmer's market is pet treats. So go out there. That is also something, if you are doing raw milk, it cannot be sold for human consumption in the state of Indiana. However, it can be sold for pet food. Contact the state chemist office for your permit. If you do not have that permit, the pet food will be asked to be taken off the shelf. And then farm produce, guess what? If you just want to sell whole uncut produce, go for it. If you're selling less than $25,000 a year, there's no regulations in the state of Indiana. If you want some regulatory advice for food safety, once again, we've had a lot of produce outbreaks nationwide, worldwide. With that being said, if you need or want some guidance, reach out to our wholesale team at the Indiana Department of Health or, once again, Purdue University. We are all here to help you. Once again, I'm not a fox in the hen house. Like, we're not out to get you. We don't bite. We want to come together, regulators, vendors, and market managers, working together to benefit you and your community. We are members of your community. Like, we want you to succeed as much as we want to be there for the fun of it. I want to go out to the car, take off my hairnet, and get my money so I can shop at the farmer's market safely. The best farmers markets have excellent communication, partnerships, and cooperation. So here's the thing. If you counted 7 foxes in this presentation, it's your lucky year. 7's a lucky number. I did have 7 foxes. However, we are not the fox. I'm not the fox. So just know it's always safe to reach out to your farmers, to your local health department, to work together to grow your farmers market. I wish you the best ever farmers market season. I know some of you guys have year-round farmers market. I hope you're doing well. And just once again, thank you so much, Christine, for this opportunity to speak to this great group. So that's all I have.
Well, thanks, Sharon. That was a ton of information. And there are some questions in the chat that I will read out. And if I don't, whoever, if what I say is not clear, then whoever put it in the chat can feel free to correct. So there was a question, you were talking about no freeze-dried. Does that include freeze-dried candy?
So freeze-dried can, I'm gonna try and stop sharing here. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you stopped.
Yeah, There we go. Okay. Yes. So freeze-dried candy is still good. So if you are doing freeze-dried candy, manufactured confectionery items such as Oreos and Twinkies, candies, um, any of those manufactured items can still be done as a home-based vendor. Nothing has changed on that for 2025.
Okay. Is there any time jellies are allowed?
Yes. So if you are doing a high acid fruit in 100% sugar, that is allowed. So you're going to hot fill that bottle. That is the one time some people tell me they hot bath that. Um, if you are doing a jam or jelly or an apple butter spread, that can be done sealed in a mason jar. That's the one time that jams and jellies can be done. No low sugar products. That you need that sugar in there to bind that fruit together to make it safe and shelf stable.
Thank you. We can't sell salad mix bags anymore.
That should never be allowed. So a cut leafy green is a TCS food. So if you're like doing a field cut and selling just so maybe that's our communication problems too. So you're just taking a field cut of the romaine lettuce. You're taking out of the field because you can't take the whole field to the market. When you do that, you're selling just the produce. If you're chopping up salad, if you're chopping up that lettuce and processing it further, that becomes a TCS food. So the only thing you're allowed to do with cut leafy greens is just get her out of the field and get her to the market. So no salad mixes. I hope that makes sense.
Sharon, this is Christina. Unless they're growing a mixed variety in the field where it's single cut, then because there are some commercially grown that you get mixes and it's just the one cut. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
if it's just like the one cut, it just can't be like if you go into the FDA definitions like cut, torn, pierced, like diced, like all those terminology, once you start doing if it looks like the Dole salad mix, that's when we got a problem because that's a TCS food. If you're just getting out of the field, I'm all about it.
Okay.
And
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 then,
Christina, you're right. Like if they want to take the romaine lettuce that they grew and put it with the iceberg lettuce that they grew, and they're not dicing and cutting it up, that's fine. That's totally fine.
okay, so I'm not sure exactly the parameters for this question, but what if someone has lettuce and bags it when the customer purchases? That was Brittany. Do you want to add anything to that, Brittany?
So, Brittany, if you've got that lettuce laying there in front of you, like you're a you are a farmer that's bringing your produce to market, and you want to bag that lettuce in front of them, that's totally fine. You did a field cut or you cut the head of lettuce. That's all you can do is cut that head of lettuce, and you want to bag the head of lettuce. I'm all about that.
You mentioned a booklet for HBVs. Will
Yes.
that be online and will it be available for free?
Yes, because we in Purdue are all about free. Anyway, so yes, it is going to be nice and pretty. I believe it can be picked up at the extension office. Once again, it has not went through the printing process yet. Um, it will be out shortly. I know Purdue is doing a rollout of it this next Friday, and then it will be online. It will be on our website. It will replace, we're going to try and get rid of all four of those old guidance documents. This will just roll it out. And it's got some nice surprises in there, such as like, we're not going to worry about the packaging anymore.
Um, I'm confused about quail eggs. I thought they were a no, but now I'm seeing they go through the LHD.
Oh, yeah. So quail eggs are a yes. It's the quail meat that's a no. I think we get really confused with that. The quail meat cannot be done under that chicken exemption rule, but the eggs can be done. The Indiana board, egg board does not do quail eggs. It's your local health department that will have to give that permit.
Um, are the markets permitted to place kiddie pools with water out for leashed furry friends during the summer? Are there any regulations on that?
Love that. Where are you guys from? I want to go to that farmer's market. So, yes, that is allowed. If the market manager wants to do that, totally fine. Sometimes I see vendors that set out water bowls. Sometimes I have vendors that are like, I don't want dogs near my stand because they pee on my tablecloth. So we leave that all up to them. And there's no rules about like how far the petting zoo needs to be from the vendors. There's nothing in the Indiana code that says that. So you yourself may have some better practices that you want to, enforce in your farmers market. Just know that's not up to the local health department. And if the local health department's like making recommendations, it's recommendations, not a requirement. And I love that idea. And Honey Bear does too. We'll come to your market.
How do vendors go about getting jalapeno pepper jellies, jams tested, or is it a no across the board?
It's pretty much a no across the board because we have not had successes with pepper butter jams. However, if you want to test it, Purdue, reach out to your local Purdue extension and they can give you those contact informations for, or I can't tell you who to do your product testing through. They're such a good resource. They're more reasonable than many. But if you want to use a private lab, you can do that too. You're looking for the water activity and the pH. Peppers generally have really scary pHs. You're adding sugar to it. It depends on the time of harvest. I'm going to leave it up to the food scientist for that. I'm not a food scientist.
That's all the questions I see. I want to remind people that Christina put in a survey into the chat, so please take a couple of minutes to complete that. Any last questions for Sharon? Feel free to unmute and ask.
Will the slides, those wonderful slides you had, will they be available for us to share with others as we try to think about having a farmer's market?
Yes.
Yes.
Christina's going to give you guys access to them. And a lot of times, too, depending on where you are, the local health department will come out and do a food training for your local farmers market. If they don't have a PowerPoint, they are free to borrow mine. Many of them already do. And so we give them the latest and greatest from Indiana Department of Health. I'm really looking forward to that. You have no idea. I can't wait for that new guidance document to come out because it's going to allow you, the home-based vendors, to do even more this year.
So I put in the chat, Sharon will share the presentation slides with me. If you email me, I will send the presentation back, and then I'll try and make them available on the website in some capacity. But email me and I'll get them to you. This is Christina.
Awesome. Hey, Christina. So are you coming to, I believe Purdue's doing that rollout next Friday. Do your market managers, mass managers, and vendors have access to that rollout next week?
Terry put that in the chat. Did you all see that? If you're
Perfect.
interested in participating, Terry Gary did drop the link into the chat. So please scroll back up and register for that. I
Terry
can
Gary
actually
is amazing, and you are going to love this new guidance document. Terry, thank you so much.
And I can actually put that on our homepage website, registration to it under meetings. I can go ahead and do that. So it'll be under our homepage, register for events and meetings. It'll just be linked to the Purdue registration.
I heard that there's over 600 people signed up so far. That is one of our biggest resources to home-based vendors out there. I'm so excited. And Brittany, I think I saw something more about pepper butter jams.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm getting a lot of feedback from my vendors on what they need to do. So if they get tested one time, is it good to come up to market? And then do they have to get it tested yearly? Or is it still just a no?
I believe the guidance that's coming out will say annually, and they do need to make sure they're using the same ingredients every time. So if they have a standard recipe that's approved by a lab, then they need to make sure that they consistently use that recipe with the same ingredients. And like, for example, if they're harvesting these peppers, that they're harvested at the same time every year. because the pH can change, determined on when they are harvested.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no problem. Once again, as a regulator, I'm not supposed to be like, oh, use Purdue. However, for once again, Terry's putting that information out there. Join us next week with that rollout of the new guidance document. And I think that the whole pepper butter jam thing will make a lot more sense.
I have a quick question. And I don't know if this is something that we as market coordinators need to know. With bird flu being so prevalent in everything going on today, is there certain regulations that we need to follow with that if we find out, like reporting wise, something's taken place?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. Your best resource is Health. Denise Deer, I believe, Dinah, I hope I'm saying her name right. So the Board of Animal Health has a website, and they give daily or weekly updates on where the bird flu is. And they could also give you resources to help your community at the market, because they also will be helping Purdue Extension during your county fairs and stuff too. Can you bring birds to the actual market? How is that safe? So reaching out to Board Animal Health is my best resource for you. And that would be at in.gov too, in.gov. And then in the search, be Board of Animal Health at in.gov.
Any last questions?
Denise is their public media person, and so she does a great job with outreach for them.
Well, thanks for being with us again this year, Sharon. We really appreciate it, and look forward to the training that's going to happen later. Is it this Friday?
I believe it's next Friday.
Next
I've been on the
Friday.
road,
Okay.
so I just
Okay.
found out about it. I've known about it, but it's been on back burner. I'm so excited. We've worked all year, over a year on this, and to have our friends at Purdue do this rollout, we're just ecstatic.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you
thank
for
you
this
again.
opportunity.
Oh, well, we're delighted to have you and appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, because we know how busy that you are.